Welcome to another edition of the Wise Guy. You know me, the Wise Guy. I'm your host, Jim Tedesco. And the topic today is, who should be our next governor? To find out, you know what to do. Stay tuned after the break.
Sit tight, the wise guy will return shortly.
Alright, I'm back. Today is Tuesday, July 28th, 2026, the year of our Lord. And I want to talk about the Florida governor's race. Now, I'm going to let these guys really speak for themselves, and I'll have minimal input into it, but let me just say that right now we have three top contenders, supposedly. Byron Donalds is number one on the list, with supposedly 51% of Florida's voters. And I say supposedly because I don't believe it for a minute. We have James Fishback, who's second, and I believe like 9%. And Jay Collins, who I believe is at 7%. So you figure, well, it's clear who the front runner is. It's Byron Donalds. Possibly. The problem with polls is, polls will say whatever they want them to say. Everybody I've talked to so far, and I've talked to quite a few people, will not vote for Byron Donalds. Well, I don't know where he's ahead at, but what I'm seeing, I don't think he's quite got the lead that they're trying to make him out to be. Of course, he does have President Trump's endorsement, which unfortunately is the worst thing President Trump could have done. And the reason, of course, is because at the time when President Trump gave his endorsement, Byron Donalds was the only candidate for governor on the Republican side. Since then, there's been many, many contenders. And we're not going to talk about most of them because they're basically sub-polling. We're just going to talk about the big three. And Byron, James Fishback, and Jay Collins. I think those are the three that have, if anybody has a shot at it, it's going to be one of those three. Now, personally, I'm going to vote for James Fishback. And the reason why is, and I'm leery a little bit, but at least he's saying the things that I believe in. He's against data centers. He's against surveillance cameras like Flock or Axon. He's for property tax relief. You know, he's pro-police, anti-crime. These are important things, I think, are important topics for Florida's immediate future. Unfortunately, the other two candidates, not so much. Although they are saying they are, but like I said, if you look deep enough, you'll find out they're really not. Like I said, I'm going to let you decide for yourself. I've got 3 videos I'm going to put up. And the first one I put up is James Fishback. And he does a mock interview. I don't know how else to term that, but he does a mock interview with Byron Donalds. So he asks some questions and takes selected clips from Byron Donalds' stance on things to answer those questions. Now, they are real. I did check them out at the time. Now, like I said, since then, Mr. Donalds has changed his stance on many things. He flip-flops, and yes, He was actually a Democrat during the Obama era. And you know how I feel about Democrats. Once a Democrat, always a Democrat. I don't think they can be trusted just because they jump ship. Because everybody knows that the only chance you have in politics these days is to run as a Republican. If you run as a Democrat, you're like automatically, you know, deleted from any shot at winning. So why would we trust a former Democrat who pretends to be a Republican? Why would we trust him with the high office of Florida? Anyway, I'm not going to keep yakking. I want you guys to listen for yourselves. So I'm going to play the James Fishback clip first. It's short. It's only a couple of minutes. To give you an idea where he stands and where Byron Donald stands. So go ahead and listen to that.
My name is James Fishback, Republican candidate for governor. This never really gets to happen, but I'm honored to be able to interview my opponent, Byron Donalds. Byron, before we get into the specifics, just tell us, where are you from?
I'm a black kid from the inner city of New York, Brooklyn, New York, if you're from there.
I'm not from there, actually. I'm from Davie, Florida, down in Broward County. I was born and raised there. My wife, born and raised in Miami-Dade County. We now live in the Panhandle. Makes sense that you're from New York, given how much you want to turn Florida into a concrete jungle. Let me just talk about one specific point, which is data centers. What is your position on data centers?
You're going to have data centers, tech firms, etc. We need to embrace that, not run away from that. And the beauty of our state, we are wide open. We have actual land in our state that is still pristine, available to use.
We do have land that's pristine. It's called the Everglades. I grew up going out there with my dad and my uncle on the weekends. Byron, you're not going to pave over the Everglades for a data center. You're not going to take over wetlands and what were once cattle ranches and citrus groves, pristine land for data centers. You're not going to do that. You want to embrace them. I want to stop them. That's what makes us different. Let's see if we have some similarities. What is your plan to make housing more affordable?
Well, number one, we have to figure out how we're going to build more houses and build them a lot faster.
Byron, building houses, we've built millions of new houses in Florida, and housing is more expensive than it's ever been. That's why BlackRock, Blackstone, foreign nationals keep coming and buying up our homes. You want to build affordable housing, Section 8 style little wooden homes. I want to make housing affordable. Here's how I'll do it. Number one, you are going to ban BlackRock, Blackstone, Wall Street firms from buying up our homes. That creates scarcity, that drives up prices, and it locks out firefighters and teachers and nurses and cops and corrections officers from being able to buy a home. Number two, we're not going to let foreign nationals speculate in our housing market. If you're a Brazilian who wants to buy a home in Florida, you're not going to be able to, because those homes have to go to Floridians, not for your investment portfolio. And the last thing is we have to reduce the all-in cost of housing by eliminating property taxes and bringing down sky-high property insurance. I will do both as governor by bringing a business approach to government, by eliminating the waste, fraud, and foolishness that's resulted in the highest property taxes ever in Florida, and unleashing new competition in property insurance, because more competition will always mean lower prices. Let's talk about something that I think as Republicans we're going to be eye to eye on. You will back the blue always, right?
Because we all saw the atrocity that happened to George Floyd. I support people protesting. I want to make sure that there's justice for George Floyd. We definitely have to do something about police brutality in America.
Byron, how do you call yourself a Republican? We all saw what happened to George Floyd. He tragically overdosed. That should never happen to anybody in this country. But why would you attack cops? Why would you bring up the left-wing lie about police brutality in America? It's a lie. Know this, Byron. I will always support the men and women of law enforcement, the men and women in our corrections departments all over this country and all over this state, because they wake up every single day and they put their life on the line. I am not going to fall for the slanderous lies of the left-wing media who attack and denigrate our corrections officers and law enforcement officers. You should be ashamed of yourself for saying that. I think we're going to agree on this one, because Republicans nearly universally do. What is your view on abortion, Byron?
Abortion, as distasteful as I think it is a medical procedure, because it's...
Let me stop you right there. Byron, medical procedure? Abortion is murder. It's not healthcare. It's not a medical procedure. It is taking a beautiful preborn life. All life begins from the moment of conception. It is conceived in God's awesome image. And what we are going to do is we are going to end abortion once and for all in Florida. We're going to make sure the law backs it up. And more importantly, we're going to make sure that if a single mom is struggling, when she finds out she's pregnant, that she can go to any crisis pregnancy center in Florida, open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, regardless of her insurance or income status. She should be able to access compassionate care, prenatal, postpartum, baby food, diapers, and even prayer. We need to step up as Americans and as Christians, and it's a shame that you would call it a medical procedure when we all know that abortion is murder and we must stop it. We obviously don't see eye to eye on abortion. We don't see eye to eye on backing the blue. Can I just ask, what do you see as the number one priority for the United States?
In terms of where the United States is right now, we have to set our priorities. Israel is our number one priority.
Byron, wait, Israel is our number one priority. Byron, you could love Israel, you could be skeptical, it doesn't matter. America is the number one priority right now. American people are the number one priority. Floridians, 23 million living from Pensacola all the way to Key West. I'm the only candidate, not only in this race, but in Florida history, that has met with voters in all 67 counties. And I can tell you that no one is losing sleep over the Middle East. We're losing sleep over the middle class. We can't afford the homes. We can't afford to stay in them. Property tax has never been higher. Property insurance is skyrocketing. We got flock cameras being built up all over the state. We got the data center invasion threatening our water, threatening our land, raising our electric bills. And Byron, you're talking about Israel? Look, I love everybody in the world. I wish everybody the best in the world. But I love my state. I'm a fourth generation Floridian. I am fighting for Floridians. I'm not worried about the people of any other country right now. Speaking of a foreign country, can I ask you, what is your relationship with AIPAC?
In 2019, I actually went to Israel. I was on a trip with AIPAC. I was over there for about 10 days.
Byron, here's the big difference between me and you. You've taken money from AIPAC, and I have signed a legally binding document that if I take money from AIPAC, from CARE, from any organization aligned with foreign interests, that I cannot run for re-election. If you take money from any group aligned with a foreign entity or a foreign interest, you are a traitor to the United States of America. I don't care if that's AIPAC, if that's CARE, if that's Australia's version or Sweden's version of AIPAC. To put America first is to never take foreign money, to never be tainted or corrupted by foreign influence. Byron, I'm just going to cut this interview short because it seems like you are not really running as a Republican. In fact, you were a registered Democrat when Barack Hussein Obama was president. You're not a real Republican. My grandfather was Republican. He was named after Abraham Lincoln. My great-grandfather was Republican. My father's a Republican. I've been a Republican my entire life. And I can tell you, someone who's not willing to stand up for the pro-life movement, someone who's not willing to ban data centers, someone who wants to build more crappy housing where orange groves and citrus once stood, is not someone who deserves to be the next governor of Florida. Byron, I wish you all the best. You got 23 days left in this race. But here's what I'll know. That the voters that I'm meeting all over Florida, they want a lifelong Floridian, not a politician like you've been. They want a business guy who's a proven outsider who will show up, shake up the system, and fight for the Florida that we love. My name is James Fishback. I'm a fourth generation Floridian. I'm running for governor because Florida is our home. America is our birthright, and we can never let anyone steal that from us. Vote August 18th.
All right, well, you've heard that one. Now let's go to the next clip. It's 12 minutes and 22 seconds. Jay Collins he's getting interviewed by the press. It's an interesting interview. I'll comment on it after you watch it, so here goes.
A lot of conversation, maybe some speculation. I've even seen some prognostication about what's going on. Before I touch that, I want to say this. It is an absolute honor and a privilege to serve as the 21st Lieutenant Governor of the very, very great and free state of Florida. I'm incredibly grateful to Governor Ron DeSantis for that opportunity to serve. It's an amazing thing. I appreciate his comments today when he was asked about that. I'm glad he called me a good guy. It was nice. And, it leads to why we're here today. So I just want to rip the Band-Aid off. I want to address it clear and simple. Today, I am announcing I will be running to become the next governor of the free and great state of Florida to follow on after Governor Ron DeSantis. It is something we've gone through a long process. We've made our decision as a family. We have gone around the community and talked to many people. And I am so grateful for the opportunity to serve now and, God willing, when we win, to continue our service as the next governor of Florida. We have 23.5 million people in this state. It's an incredible opportunity. Every morning when I wake up, my focus is the same. It's taking care of my family and keeping our state as great as humanly possible. That mission will never change. When you look at why we do this, why would you jump into this? Why would we want to be the governor of Florida? I think back to where I came from. I am my father's son. I'm the son of a failed farmer. I was born into poverty, adopted by my grandparents, joined the military, got shot, got blown up, did these things, had an opportunity to serve in the nonprofit sector and then get into politics. And while my dream was never to get into politics, we are blessed to live in this nation. And if good men and good women don't step in and continue to serve and stand up for what matters, we could lose everything we have. And that's really why we're here today. It's about a dream. It's about the American dream. My life has encompassed that. I am very blessed to be here today. And it's about fighting for that for the 23.5 million people in our state. So as we roll this out, I want to give you an opportunity to ask a few questions before I have a couple of closing remarks. And who wants to start? Holly, go ahead.
All right, you're going to be up against a crowded field, and your main opponent is going to be Congressman Byron Donalds. He's got a $40 million war chest. He's got the endorsement of Donald Trump. How do you compete against that?
Well, Holly, it's good to see you here again today. And, that's a great question. Let me just take a step back. And I kind of answered a little bit of that just prior. I've been told many times that the road was too far, the mountain was too difficult and too high. It started when I was a kid, growing up on the wrong side of the track, so to speak, right? Didn't have a whole lot of opportunity, didn't have a whole lot of money. When we lost our farm, it was the same thing. When I got to college and I lost my scholarship and I went and did other things, I had to keep pushing on. When I joined the military and eventually got into special forces and got shot and did surgery on myself, and I got blown up and lost a leg and requalified. When I got into the nonprofit sector and I ran a ton of marathons and ran a bike across America, and then when I got into a D+3 seat to run against the mayor of Tampa's mother-in-law, there's one commonality. Everybody told me it was too hard, not possible, don't do it. We were successful in each and every one of those things. We chose this spot for a couple of things. As you look around us, it says we the people of Florida behind us, because ultimately that is who we serve, that is what we want to do, and that is why we are here today and why we chose this exact spot. The people have a voice. Yes, the road is hard, but the best things in life aren't given to you, they're earned. And you have to go out and earn the vote in Florida. That is why we're here, that's what we're going to do, and that is exactly how we're going to win.
I'm curious besides the obvious differences between yourself and Congressman Donalds in terms of your background, in terms of your history, at least in terms of policy, what sets you two apart? Because you're both conservative Republicans.
Certainly. And, I want to say one thing. Look, I have no problems person to person with Byron Donalds. I don't. He has a family. He's a good family man. I'm grateful for those things. I don't know him that well, but it isn't personal. It's about policy. It's about service. It's about vision and dreams. So let's break it down. In my time in the Senate, about 3 years, 3 sessions, I passed 55 bills in 3 years. I think I have a track record of success, performance, getting things done. Those have been conservative wins. There are many of the things we talk about here in the free state of Florida, and it's something we have to continue to do. If you're going to be the governor after somebody like Ron DeSantis, who is in my opinion, greatest governor in our state's history, a man who has absolutely put points on the board every single day, you better show up and get things done. I think my track record is very, very clear on that. When you step into things like being tough on crime, I absolutely believe that we have to back our men and women of law enforcement without equivocation. If we ever lose the opportunity or lose our way and start being soft on crime, I think we're going to start having issues in the community. When I ran, it was on economy, education, and safety and security in the community. And I set out that way purposefully because it all starts at the end with safety and security. When your communities are strong and safe, you build strong families. Strong families build a great businesses build an economy, and it keeps pushing forward, right? And then I think let's look at a recent thing. Let's look at insider trading. I don't do that. I have a 401k. I hope I get great returns in my 401k. It's not always the case, right? I think it's something that we have to do. We got to be somebody who says what we mean what we say, and then just get things done. More than anything else, those are the biggest discriminators. And I want to put this out here. Everybody here has a vision for what they want to do. I believe most people get into service in politics because they have the right approach. They want to do the right thing. Some people may lose their way. Not everybody does. But it's the vision. It's the dream of where we go from here that makes a difference. And that's exactly why we're standing here, why I'm fighting to serve as the next governor of Florida, and why I want to continue serving our 23.5 million people. Hold on. I'm going to go over here first. I told him.
One of your competitors, James Fishback, has been critical of you and Layla, and is apparently getting some kind of help from the governor, or people on the governor's staff. Do you have any response to some of the criticisms that he's levied against you? And what do you think about the thought that he's got people, apparently in communication?
Yeah, so let's just start from the beginning. Let's talk about the things that are being talked about. I unequivocally have fought and defended our way of life and our Constitution here at home and abroad. I have deployed, fought, been shot, bled, and buried my friends in defense of our Constitution and our way of life. I am pretty sure that he has not done that. I am pretty sure that when I put my neck on the line to defend our Constitution and our way of life, I meant every single thing I said because I understood the value. I understood the weight of those words. I have deployed across the planet, and it was the honor of a lifetime. The very best people I know, often, unfortunately, were the ones that we had to bury. And it dishonors the families to not keep your focus on that. I think of the moms, the wives left behind to mourn their loved ones. I think of the kids who had to go on without their dads. And it's personal. I have no personal issues with James Fishback. I don't. He lives his life. I'm going to live mine. And I am focused on my vision, where I'm going for the state of Florida, and how we're going to continue to lead. Because I have been granted the opportunity as Lieutenant Governor to do just that. My mission, focus, and resolve are the same. You might even say the mission continues even when those battlefields change. Is that covered? All right. You're up.
Did you let the governor know ahead of your announcement?
I did. The governor and I talk regularly. In the end, you try not to inundate people with frivolous phone calls and stuff, but yeah, we talk regularly. He's a good, amazing governor, and he's someone who I am so lucky to get to ask questions of and learn from. He has been an absolute juggernaut in standing up for our state and fighting for the values that matter. And, of course, you always got to let your boss know. Great. Go get him.
Do you think you're going to be able to secure his endorsement at some point?
Yeah, so you know what? I didn't expect any endorsement coming in here. Like I said, man, when I lost my leg, I wasn't told I got to stay in the Army. I was told I had to go earn it. You got to requalify as a Green Beret, right? You better earn it if you want to be the next governor of Florida. So it's put up, shut up, and get to work, right? That's exactly how I view things. Everything that value in life is earned. It is not given. All right. Gary, yeah, I know you had a question.
Well, no, I do. I'd like to circle back to some comments you made when you were asked about distinguishing yourself.
You got it.
There's some comments you made about distinguishing yourself from Representative Donald. I just want to make sure I understand. So, are you suggesting in your comments that you don't think he's got legislative achievements to be able to speak up compared to you? Do you think that he has engaged in some level of insider trading? As you mentioned, you only do a 401k. So I just want to make sure when you bring that up, that is a contrast you are trying to distinguish yourself with him.
Gary, so I want to talk about the things that set me aside. Those are those things. I would encourage you to go research and evaluate your candidates that are out there on the ballot clearly. And if those are things that we're curious about, go Google those. I bet you can find what you're looking for.
No, I can. I'm just asking you if you are suggesting that Byron Donald or his wife or anyone that's engaged in insider trading, despite the comments he's making the brokers have been doing. I'm just trying to get your thought on that.
Yep. My thought is I'm talking about my vision, my views, and our approach, and I would encourage you to Google and research the candidates thoroughly. All right. That's it. Last question.
Are you committed to defending the rights of freedom of speech of the people of Florida, including the right to freely criticize Israel without being attacked for being anti-Semitic?
Yeah, I sure am. As I mentioned earlier, I deployed and I served for 23 years. I got shot defending our nation. I got hit by a mortar defending our nation, and I swore an oath to defend this nation. So having some wannabe ex-Twitter warrior mention those things, it's a little frustrating because I do support our Constitution. I have defended our Constitution. I love our nation. I would die for this nation. I almost have a couple times. So when we talk about that, our First Amendment rights are huge. It's what we fight for every day. And you go all the way through that. I love our country. We are blessed to protect her. We are blessed to live here. And more than anything else, I want to make sure that we leave this better than we got it. And just to add this note in here, my wife's family are Lebanese. So you understand how that works and how I protect my way of life and my family. Does that answer your question? Yes. All right. Hey, you all, thank you so much for being here today. I appreciate the opportunity. God bless each of you, and thank you.
That was interesting, wasn't it? Near as I can tell, the only thing that Mr. Collins talks about is his time in the service. And we thank you for your service, Mr. Collins, but missing a leg or getting shot at has very little to do with being the new governor. He didn't actually talk about his accomplishment, what he planned on doing as governor. He just kept harping on his military record, which, by the way, is impressive, but once again, doesn't really tell us anything. Now, he did a debate with James Fishback and Paul Renner because Byron Donalds would not entertain doing a debate with any of the three of them, said they weren't worthy. But anyway, during the debate, some of the questions, of course, were pretty basic, you know. Do you support data centers? Well, Paul Renner and Jay Collins both said they did, that it was an inevitability, and if we did it right, it would be fine for Florida. James Fishback, on the other hand, said no, we're not going to have data centers in Florida. The same question was asked regarding the flock camera surveillance system. Once again, James Fishback was the only one who said no, I will put a stop to flock in the state of Florida, where the other two, Jay Collins and Paul Renner, said, well, you know, they're good for law enforcement. I'll let you draw your own conclusion on that. Alright, so, like I said, I don't think Jay Collins said much of anything. You know, he seems to harp on his, I mean, I could see him as governor. Well, as governor of the state of Florida, I want to tell you about how I lost my leg. You know, technically we really don't care. I mean, it sucks that it happened, but it has nothing to do with running the great free state of Florida. You know. Anyway, for the third and final video, this one's a bit longer. It's almost 30 minutes. We're going to let Byron Donalds hang himself. And to some degree he does. I mean, he tries to justify everything he's done wrong in his life, but he still has done them. And I, for one, don't believe a leopard can change his spots. You know, you get older and wiser, not necessarily more honest. or more law-abiding. Well, I'm a little biased, but still. So I'm going to go ahead and run that now, so watch that. And when it's all done, I'll throw in my 2 cents.
Well, I mean, look, I wouldn't be here without my mother. My mother did so much for me. She sacrificed a lot to help me get the best education I could. My mom was a school choice mom before school choice was a thing. She moved me out of public school very early, and then made a ton of sacrifices to put me in private school so I could get the best education possible. She was a tough lady. She's tough. She was strict. She did the very best job she could do for me and for my sisters. And so I wouldn't be in the position I am today without my mother. Leaving New York was a decision as a young kid, was basically like, I'm going to go somewhere else. I'm going to go far away. I kind of looked at Florida, looked at a couple other states that I figured I was going to go to get my college education. But I can't stress enough, growing up in New York was hard upbringing, but my mother did everything.
When you say it was hard, what was the hardest part of it?
Well, we grew up poor, number one. In my neighborhood in Crown Heights, Brooklyn at the time, that was during the crack epidemic. I remember sometimes I was going to baseball practice in the morning, and you would be walking down the street to go to the train station. You see crack vials all over the street corners in the early mornings before people can come out and clean them up from the night before.
Can I ask you what happened to your father?
My parents just never married. You know, things just didn't work out.
Do you have a relationship with him at all?
Yeah, we do have a relationship. We talk periodically, but I just didn't grow up with my dad.
Okay. Obviously, when you came to Florida as a young man, you did have some troubles with the law yourself.
Yeah.
You were arrested, I think, when you were 18 on a marijuana charge. What can you tell me about that?
Stupid decision. Honestly, I was walking down the street. I was leaving a party. Officers came up, asked me if I would empty my pockets. I said, yes, of course. I had a dime bag of marijuana in my pocket. That's the story. And so, you know, it's tough because there was a lot of decisions that I wish I could go back and redo from those early years. Like 18, 19, and 20 were really tough years for me. Made a lot of bad decisions that I regret. But in life, you don't just, you're not who you are at the lowest point in your life. What you do is you decide to just, you know, push forward and try to make sure you make better decisions in the future. And I would tell people, if you examine my life since 20 years old, my life has really been a story of redemption.
And I want to talk about that redemption arc, but before I get there, I just want to be clear on a couple of things with regard to your arrest. Your ex-wife says that you were actually not just possessing drugs, but you were selling small amounts of drugs.
Yeah, it was bad decisions.
So you
and
were.
I can't undo that decision.
So you were selling.
Yeah, for a period of time, low-level amounts, terrible decisions. Jim, like I told you, those years of my life, there are a lot of things I wish I could undo. I wish I could, but I can't do that. You know, I was a youth leader for 12 years in my community in Southwest Florida. And what we always told the young kids is that when you mess up, you make up, but you never give up. And I messed up early on. It's one of the reasons why I spent so much of my other years in Southwest Florida mentoring young kids, serving in my church, helping them make sure they don't make the decisions that I made when I was 18.
And you had another incident with a fraud charge that related to a bank debit card, or
yes.
You know, and again, it was something that happened when I think you were 20. In both those cases, it seemed that you received some mercy from the courts, either through a pretrial diversion program or by recognizing that you were a youthful offender, having your record sealed and eventually expunged. There has been some concern raised that, for instance, you're the sponsor of the DC Crimes Bill,
yes.
which would overhaul some of the criminal justice for youthful offenders in the District of Columbia area. And there are those who believe that the stance you're taking now is hypocritical, given that some of the very grace that you were shown in cases in Florida, you would deny to people in similar situations in the District of Columbia.
Well, listen, first let me talk to the DC Crimes Act. I'm a proud sponsor of it. The problem in the District of Columbia is that they were treating 24-year-olds as if they were juveniles. And look, I will never say that what the decisions I made when I was very young were right decisions or smart decisions. They were terrible decisions, desperate decisions. But in Florida, I had to face the music as an adult. In DC, they were letting 20 or 4-year-olds be tried as juveniles. That's not right, Jim. It's one of the reasons why juvenile crime in DC is shooting through the roof. So let me be clear with you on this one. So what we did in DC is we said, if you're 24 years old, if you're 20 years old, if you're 19 years old, you're going to be tried as an adult in the DC system, not as a child.
Except I'm not sure your description of what the impact of the law is accurate. From what I understand, It doesn't necessarily mean that 18 to 24-year-olds would be tried as juveniles. It would allow people in that range, in certain cases, to have their convictions sealed and receive more flexible sentencing options at a judge's discretion.
Jim, I'm just telling you that's not true. What we did in the DC Crimes Act is we made sure that people who were of that age, people who are the age of maturity, the age of adulthood,
the age
were
that
going to
you
be
were,
tried. Exactly.
The age that you were.
And in Florida, I had to face the music as an adult, not as a juvenile. Now, Florida does have laws around diversion, being able to seal records, and yes, those were things that were afforded to me. And I look back on those days and I say, you know what, that helped me restart my life, so be it. But in DC, it was very different.
When you faced that time when you were 18, 19, 20 years old, it almost seems as if the first 2 decades of your life are very different from the second 2 decades. So I want you to sort of say, what do you think was the critical moment in that? And I know that from looking at some interviews, you talk about meeting and the influence that your current wife, Erica, has on you. Talk to me about how that change came about.
Well, look, at 20, I was at a real depth in my life. I was at the bottom. And, I remember very clearly, I was sitting in the room one day looking up, and I said, I don't know how I got here, but I'm going to make sure that I'm never here again. And so after that point, every decision I made was about being a better man than I was before. It was about being a father to the kids that I knew I would have in the future, and being a quality husband to my wife and a leader in my community. All things that have occurred. At 21, I gave my life to Christ. It's a story out there. I've talked about it before. I actually gave my life to Christ at Cracker Barrel when I was at work. But before giving my life to Christ, the person who got me going to church was my wife now, my girlfriend at the time, Erica Lees, now Erica Donalds. And so the redemption story first was acknowledging that I was making a lot of terrible decisions as a young man, as a young kid, and that I had to do better for myself. The second was acknowledging that God is there for us every step of the way if you trust Him. And so I started going to church, and the rest is history.
I don't want to make too much of this, but it's a fact. You would be the first black Republican governor of a southern state.
Yes.
Where does race come, where does that notion that you would be the first black Republican of a southern state, does that enter into your thinking at all? Do you think, obviously you've lived your entire life as being black, I get that answer,
it's a thing, yeah.
But do you recognize that this would be significant?
I'm aware of it, but I don't really focus on it. Actually, in this entire time in politics, I've not really focused on race as a marker.
Do you think that you had an advantage of moving up in the Republican Party because you're black, because that you're someone who the Republican Party would want to champion to show their diversity?
No. And I'll tell you, actually, this race has been a little different for governor, but in any of the other campaigns I've been a part of, I was always the underdog. That's why this one's a little different. I was always the underdog. Never really the choice of donors, never really the choice of a lot of the traditional segments of the Republican Party.
I'm fascinated by the dynamic between you and the current governor. It seemed like for a long time you and he were strong allies, and then something happened. And I think it basically comes down to you endorsing President Trump and not him when he was running for the White House. How would you describe your relationship to Ron DeSantis?
It's been better, but I think it's something where you can find ways to come back together and work about what we're going to do for the future of our state.
What do you think his biggest mistake has been as governor?
He's actually done a great job. To be honest with you, Jen, I think he's done a great job. I think being in leadership is tough. When you're the person that has to make the decisions, it's hard, and it's really about just making sure I think you get as much information and input as you can. But you can't really second guess somebody who's been in that position because you've not been in that position.
Does it bother you that so many of his senior advisors, or several of his senior aides, were found to have actually be giving advice to and helping your opponent, James Fishback, someone who has been using a virulent and basically a racist attack against you, and yet there are the governor's aides who have been seen helping him and who they admit were helping him for a time?
One thing people need to understand is that the internal politics inside of political parties is probably far more vicious than the things that happen between Republicans and Democrats and independents. Look, when you get into this business, you better have Kevlar skin. Not thick skin, Kevlar skin. And so I think that's something where, if the governor chooses to deal with that, he will with his people and his team. We stay focused on just campaigning, working hard, earning the votes of the people of Florida, because at the end of the day, that's what matters.
What do you think of James Fishback's attacks on you?
Honestly, I just think it's somebody trying to get more attention than anything else. So I really don't pay much attention to him. I don't pay much attention to anybody else who's running. How I've always done my campaigns, Jim, is I stay focused on what I'm doing. I go meet the people that I'm asking for their vote for. We talk about the issues that are important to them. You can't get caught up in the distractions.
When we come back, we get into the issues. Stay with us. Welcome back. We continue our conversation with Byron Donalds, the leading Republican candidate for governor, turning to the biggest issue he may face: what to do about property taxes.
Well, I agree with the governor that we need to repeal homestead property taxes. Property taxes in our state, especially for Floridians, has doubled in the last decade. In the last 5 years, local government budgets have grown massively out of control. The dodging efforts that the CFO and the governor are doing right now are critical for the future of our state. We're going to continue those dodging efforts, and it's going to be for every form of government in the state of Florida, including the state of Florida and state agencies. Everybody has to be examined. Everybody's got to tighten their belts, because the people in our state, those who are working hard every single day, are seniors who are trying to find ways to keep their Florida dream alive, and our young people who are trying to get into the Florida dream, they don't have the cash. So we have to do this. And then the key thing is, how do you cut these budgets while making sure that sheriffs still get paid, that deputies still get paid, that firefighters still get paid, you take care of roads, you take care of land management issues. That's the balance that we're going to have to
just
strike.
want to be clear, because when you make a statement like you want to end all homesteaded property taxes, does that include homesteaded property taxes that go to school districts?
Yes, and then we talk about school districts. And let me talk about school districts now. The biggest people who've actually increased property taxes on the hardworking men and women of our state are school districts. But let's also acknowledge the reality, Jim. Miami-Dade public schools, their populations are decreasing. Same in Broward County, same in Hillsborough County, same in Collier County where I live, Lee County, Florida, etc. And the reason why their populations are decreasing is because of universal school choice, which the legislature finally passed a couple years ago, which is something I fully support. I've been a school choice champion and advocate my entire time in politics. That's not going to change. But the fiscal reality is that the school districts have less students today than they did when we passed universal school choice, yet at the same time, their budgets have expanded because they're collecting far more property taxes than they ever have.
It sounds great to tell people we want to do away with your property taxes and we're not going to affect sheriffs or police officers. I don't know how you can do that without affecting a lot of services, including police and fire. But how do you pay for roads? How do you pay for parks, libraries? Aren't all those issues that are important to people?
They are all important and they're all critical. But let's talk about DOGE first, and I'll come to the key services you're talking about. When it comes to DOGE, they are starting this process of examining all these budgets. I'm aware of the governor and the CFO's formula. It's a good formula to start with. What we want to do is say, let's take that formula as a baseline and then do a 5-year running analysis of every budget in our state, examining line items, and then making sure that the public is aware of where to find all this information so they can examine it in real time and talk to their local officials. Jim, this was what I did for my career. I spent 17 years in banking, insurance, and financial services. So if you're going to talk about long-run financial analysis, which is what DOGE essentially is, then this is one of the reasons why I'm uniquely suited to be Florida's next governor.
There's a policy now in Florida to where if a school district is because of declining population, has free space, that charter schools can lay claim to some of those classroom space and operate in them. Should those charter schools or the management companies that operate them pay the school districts, since they're using classrooms, since they're using libraries, cafeterias, using their janitorial services to help clean up the school? Should the charter schools have to pay some negotiated fee to the school districts for the use of those classrooms?
I think something can be negotiated, but let's acknowledge that when school districts collect property taxes, that is for the education of children, the facilities for these children in the community that they're in. Miami-Dade collects property taxes from every resident for public school buildings and facilities. So this isn't money that the school districts just have of their own volition. They didn't create this money out of thin air. They tax the people of Florida in order to have money to house students for the purpose of education and to pay for the physical plant and the maintenance of these facilities. So could something be negotiated? Sure, of course.
Should something be negotiated?
I think so. I think something should be negotiated. I think something could be negotiated. But let's be also very clear. I don't think it's right for school districts to go to charter schools and say you have to pay market rents, because let's be honest, the school district isn't paying market rents. They're taxing citizens to get that money to pay for education, and that's what we want to do as a society, but that is taxpayer money. It is not school district money.
You said, obviously, you've been a major proponent for charter schools for a long time, school
Yes.
choice. Your wife is also very involved in it, has been for a long time.
Yes.
Used to serve on a school board, has operated certain management companies, and is involved. I think in one of your disclosure forms, you had said in recent years she has made more than $1 million in salary and other benefits from her time working for companies related to charter schools. If you're elected governor, will your wife continue to operate businesses related to charter schools and schools in general? Do you see that as a potential conflict of interest?
Oh, well, let's address the last part of your question. My wife is actually not really managing those schools anymore. She started those schools. Those management contracts have been turned over to other entities. My wife, who's a businesswoman, not just education, my wife was a CFO, Chief Financial Officer, and a Chief Compliance Officer for an investment management firm out of New York. She did that job, worked her way up from the bottom like a lot of people did. She's a professional, she's a businesswoman. We are gonna make sure, number one, that she's not gonna have any businesses with the state of Florida. That's not going to happen. Number two, we will comply with all laws, and we will make sure that there are clear boundaries for what my wife's businesses are versus my responsibility of governing the state of Florida.
So you envision that she will continue to have some role in the business community. She's not just going to be First Lady. She's actually going to continue to have a career in which she's working for companies, and you're saying that those companies will not have business with the state of Florida?
Yeah, those businesses will not have, her businesses will not work with the state of Florida. I want to be very clear on that. That is not going to happen because obviously that just doesn't look good, Jim, and we're not going to do that. The second thing is my wife is a professional. She's an accountant by trade. Like I said, she was a chief financial officer for an investment firm. She's a very accomplished woman. I mean, honestly, I'm lucky. You know, I kind of hit the jackpot in the game of life with my wife, Erica. She's awesome. Also, I would tell you, this might be the first time in Florida history where the First Lady is a professional who owns businesses. And I think that's a good thing. I think it's something to be celebrated.
I want to talk about data centers for a second.
Yeah.
That's become an issue that 2 years ago, if you had asked about data centers, nobody would know what you were talking about. Now it's suddenly become a major topic here in Florida, and I think it's going to be an increasing topic here in this race. You were recently supported by a PAC, the Leading the Future PAC, that has promised $5 million to support your governor's campaign because they want more data centers being built. There are obviously issues related to those data centers in terms of electricity and their use of water. And the DeSantis administration is right now trying to push for having a lot of regulation on those data centers. Talk to me about your vision for how data centers fit into the future of Florida.
Well, two things. I want to make sure we talk data centers, but then I also want to talk AI, because I think a lot of times the two get confused and conflated. With data centers in particular, my position is similar to President Trump's position. He announced it the other day. Data centers need to be able to generate their own power on site. I think that's important. We don't want to see electricity bills for the people of Florida go up because of new AI data centers, hyperscale data centers in the state of Florida. Number two, with water. The new designs for a lot of these centers are actually significantly better with water usage. We want to make sure that we're protecting Florida's environment. When I was in the State House and also in the U.S. House, I've always supported the funding necessary for the Central Everglades Restoration Plan and also for protecting Florida's environment. We want to make sure that if these centers are built in Florida, that they're still protecting Florida's environment. So that's data centers. Is there a pathway to do it in our state? Yeah, but there are two lines that have to meet. We got to make sure are handled.
Before you move to AI,
Sure.
I just want to drill down on one of the points you said,
Sure.
producing electricity.
Yes.
I think that you've talked about before about increasing the use of small modular nuclear reactors.
Yes.
So you envision a scenario in which the state of Florida will get more aggressive in terms of building new nuclear facilities in the state?
I think so. It's without question. The future of any economy always is based on power. If you have baseload power, you can grow an economy. If you don't have baseload power, your economy shrinks. We were talking about affordability earlier. Well, if Florida doesn't address its future power needs, how are we going to have the jobs for the young people who want to build their dream in Florida? It just doesn't come together, Jim. So we are going to have to address baseload power. And let me be also clear, solar plants and wind farms do not address baseload power. That's intermittent at best. It's far more expensive. It doesn't decrease the per kilowatt hour that every Floridians going to have to
What
pay.
assurances
So we
can-
do need small modular reactors. We need them.
I mean, when you talk about building nuclear facilities,
Yes.
it can scare some people. It can also concern some people as to what regulations are going to be surrounding them and all those sorts of things. Talk to me about what protections are there going to be when you start talking about building small nuclear reactors around the state?
Jim, these are the same
being built by private companies, by the way, for their data centers.
Understood, Jim. Listen. This is the same technology that has been sitting on our nuclear subs for the last 80 years in the United States of America. And our Navy men weren't coming home with green eyes and yellow hair. Well, except if they were blonde, they probably had yellow hair. But nobody was coming home with green eyes. The same nuclear reactors that are in the belly of every nuclear sub in our fleet is the same technology around small modular reactors and micronuclear reactors. The Department of War is looking at this right now in terms of trying to figure out how to facilitate power needs if there's a forward operating base or for national emergencies. This is energy, quite frankly, that the United States, we were the pioneers of this through the Manhattan Project. We should be leveraging this for the future of our state. So if you want to talk about data centers and making sure people don't have to come out of pocket for more in their electricity bills, I think small modular nuclear reactors are an answer to that question.
Vaccinations.
Yes.
Florida law currently requires immunizations for polio, diphtheria, measles, rubella, whooping cough, and mumps for entry and attendance in Florida schools.
Yes.
The DeSantis administration has been advocating doing away with those requirements. What is your position when it comes to vaccinations for school kids?
Well, there's two sets of vaccinations. One are the vaccines that have come in through rulemaking that have not gone through a legislative process. I agree with the governor and the Surgeon General that list of vaccines in the rulemaking process should be informed consent for parents. The core vaccines that you listed, the biggest ones among them, polio and MMR, I still believe that those should be requirements to attend schools. I do. I think the bigger issue for a lot of mothers in particular who are concerned about vaccines is how the vaccine schedule has just been overloaded on infants the second they come into the world. I have 3 sons, so this is something that my wife and I have looked at personally. The vaccination schedule for my 22-year-old son was not as impactful as the vaccine schedule for my 14-year-old son. So I think in part we should spread out that vaccination schedule. There are some core vaccines like polio and MMR that I think are important. Frankly, in Southwest Florida, there's a measles outbreak right now.
Yeah.
There's one happening right now. So I think MMR is important to continue. These are things that myself and the legislature will go through, and it will be based upon the information and the data, not just historically, but the stuff today as well.
Would you keep Latipo? You wouldn't keep Latipo as your Surgeon General, would you?
It's possible. I mean, look, I know Dr. Latipo. He's done a very good job for the state of Florida. But let's actually be focused on the campaign and win first, and then we'll talk about that.
All right. So now you've heard Byron. I got to be honest with you. Between the 3 candidates, I believe Byron Donalds is probably the worst possibility for Florida's governor. He has a history, drug abuse, drug dealing, possibly domestic violence. I'm sorry, but those are not the qualities I want in my Florida governor. Now, James Fishback also has a few skeletons in his closet, too. However, James Fishback has never been convicted of the supposed crimes that he supposedly committed. I don't know. Now, Jay Collins has a squeaky clean record. And like I said, if it wasn't for his stance on data centers and flock cameras and APAC, I was going to vote for him. But I have a problem with the flock cameras. I have a problem with data centers. I don't really care about whether we give Israel money, and I don't think we should. That's not the state's responsibility. That's the federal government's. The federal government wants to give money to Israel, that's between them and Israel. Florida, I don't believe, should be outsourcing our money. for lack of a better term. And of course, there's, Byron Donalds is also not tough on crime. He wants to give, fellow black people a break on crime, because they're the ones who commit most of the crimes. So he thinks we can fix this problem by, treating them with kid gloves and, catering to them. I don't believe that. I think it's time we get tough with these people, and if necessary, even shoot them when they commit crimes. So that they'll understand that if you commit a crime in Florida, you may not live to tell the tale. I think that's the only real prevention that's going to happen in our state. And like I said, unfortunately, Byron has flip-flopped on a lot of these things. He was pro-abortion, now he's against it. He was pro-data centers, now he's a little iffy on it. He was pro defunding the police. Now he's saying, no, we need the police. When you flip-flop like that, it's hard to have credibility. I can't give that man any credibility because, he can't keep his story straight. He changes the story with the wind depending upon how the political winds blow. If tomorrow he woke up and people were for abortion, he'd come out and say, yeah, we absolutely need abortion. It's a good thing, But instead he heard that, the majority of people in Florida don't agree with abortion. So therefore he modified his thinking to cater to those who, the majority. And that's a problem for me. I don't really care where a man stands on an issue as long as he stands there and sticks with it, Now that wouldn't give me a better impression of him if, he was pro-abortion. But I'd say, all right, at least he's honest. We know where he stands. When he goes back and forth, flip-flop goes around, he just loses all credibility with that. Same with Jay Collins. I don't understand. Now, Jay Collins is against abortion as far as I know. But he's also for data centers and flock cameras. He believes that the data centers are a necessary evil in Florida, and the flock cameras are good for law enforcement, even though it's been proven time and again that law enforcement actually abuses the data from the flock cameras, chasing ex-girlfriends, ex-wives, monitoring their whereabouts, who they're with. That's a problem. And the bottom line is, and that's a whole different thing, so I'm not going to get too deep into it. But the big problem is, look, the American people do not need to be spied upon. What we do in our own time is our business. The surveillance state is not what America needs or should need. We have the Fourth Amendment that guarantees your right to privacy, to unreasonable, not to have unreasonable searches and seizures. First Amendment right to speak your mind. And yet every day we're seeing those rights go further and farther away. It's not just the flock cameras. You get pulled over now by law enforcement. Even if you didn't do anything wrong, they're going to ask you if they can see the contents of your phone. This is ridiculous. It's none of their fucking business. I don't take my phone anywhere with me, so I don't care. There ain't nothing on there that's incriminating anyway, because I don't really do internet searches on the phone. The phone's mostly for talking and texting. And when I'm done with a text, I generally delete it. You know, so not that there's anything dangerous in there, but once again, my business, nobody else's. And this is where we're going. It's called, what do they call it, mission creep. They start out with this, then they end up with that, and next thing you know, they'll be forcing cameras in your house, even in your bathroom, possibly even in your bedroom. Well, such and such was having sex with his wife. We didn't like the way he was doing it, so let's bust him. Yeah. Or Mr. Smith over there was in the bathroom taking a dump. He's got explosive diarrhea. We need to modify his diet because that's not acceptable. And you can laugh all you want. It's coming if we don't stop it. Once we get used to being photographed or videotaped everywhere outside, it's just a matter of time that they'll bring it inside. I, for one, won't have it. And I'm ready to take up arms to prevent it from happening in my house. Because once that happens, it's game over. Nobody will be safe then from anything. So let's nip this in the bud by stopping the flock cameras and the Axon cameras, because that's next. I'm probably going to do a video on those soon. But they're similar to flock, except that they mount on light poles. And apparently light bulbs are basically already set up for them, providing the needed electric and everything. So there's some problems here. And of course they'll be harder to take down too, but I'm sure people will figure it out one way or the other. But this is ridiculous. So any candidate that doesn't strongly object to these things, I'm going to cross off the list to vote for. So right now that stands Jay Collins and Byron Donalds. Those two are pro flock cameras because they believe it's a useful tool for law enforcement. How about we go back to the old way of law enforcement, actually work to catch the criminals? A little leg work. They want the cameras to do their job for them, and all they do is go in and arrest them. That's not the way it needs to work. Because the camera's not an accurate way of detecting anything anyway. Not 100%. So, August 18th is the primary in Florida to vote for your potential gubernatorial candidate as a Republican. I hope you'll vote for James Fishback. I know we're taking a chance on him, and don't know a lot about him, but to me he reminds me of a first-term Donald Trump. Remember when Donald Trump says, I'm going to fix America and put it back toward the people before he was compromised? That's who I see Fishback as. The difference is I don't think Fishback can be bought off. I hope not, anyway. But he does say the right things. Not a guarantee that he'll carry out any of it. But, that's what the recall vote is for. If he doesn't do what he says he's going to do, we start a recall vote and kick him the fuck out, But I'm telling you, I believe he's a better shot than Jay Collins or Byron Donalds. Now, you know, before he won his case in court, you know, James Fishback, because he got sued by the other two, that he wasn't an actual Florida resident. Turns out he is. Even though both Byron and Jay are from out of state, they weren't born here in Florida. Jay, I think, was from Montana or North Dakota or some place like that. And of course, Byron's from New York. Do we really want a New Yorker down here running Florida? I think not. So, neither one of those two really are familiar with the pulse of Florida. I don't believe anyway. I think Jay is probably closer to it than Donald's is. But they're still outsiders. Now, say, if I'd have had the money, I'd have ran for governor. But I'm too much like James Fishback. But without the skeletons. There really aren't any skeletons in my closet. Not really. You know. Nothing that would hurt me politically. Except I'm outspoken, brash, and I can't be bought off. That's why I said I would make the perfect governor, actually. Maybe next time, we'll see. Of course, I'm not getting any younger either, but, you know. So I hope that everybody votes for James Fishback. I believe he's our best shot. And if you're dead set against him, then, well, Jay Collins is probably your second best bet. Still pro data center and pro flock camera, but he might actually work out as far as eliminating property tax, which is also a big issue here. Byron, on the other hand, he's going to bend you over, shove it up your ass dry and hard, and you will regret the day you elected him. He's dangerous. He's a Democrat as far as I'm concerned. And anything he says can't be believed. Now, that's my opinion, and my opinion only, probably. But, you know, I'm entitled to that. I'm also going to be running this on YouTube. I don't know if it'll get kicked off or not. It shouldn't. But we'll see. And, of course, it'll be on Rumble because that's my channel of choice. So watch the videos, and if you have to watch us more than once, that's fine. Do a little research of your own. Look into all three of them. And, you know, only believe the truth. Because there's going to be some stuff against Fishback. Oh, he's a pedophile, he's this, he's never been convicted of it. If you haven't been convicted, it don't count. You know. Remember, they labeled Trump as a rapist, even though he's never been convicted of it. You know. Because they want him gone, and that's why. So they use that because in the old days, you know, if you were even accused of rape or sexual assault or pedophilia, that was it. Your career was over and you were done. Fortunately, the American people aren't falling for that anymore. Now we want proof. And the only reason they want Fishback out is because he has no love for Israel. You know. And that's a subject that I don't want to get into. I told you how I felt about it. That's a federal issue. If the government wants to support Israel, that's on them. It's not a state's issue. The state should not get involved in foreign diplomacy. Anyway, that's all I got to say about it. Like I said, the primary's coming up August 18th. Mark it on your calendar. If you're not registered to vote, get registered. I think you've only got a few days left. Maybe. And if you are a registered Republican, run down there and make sure you vote. Don't trust the mail-in vote either. Go to the damn polls and vote in person. That's what I've done. That's what I've always done. I don't trust the mail. Anyway, that's all I got to say, so until next time, we'll see ya.